Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the importance of information management to AI for the built and managed environment. My name's Sarah Rock. I'm a partner at law firm Boodle, Hatfield, where I head up the construction team with a particular interest in digital construction and anything techy. So I'm quite excited to hear what our panellists have got to say this afternoon. So without ado, let's have everybody introduce themselves. James, would you care to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having us here. I'm truly excited for this. My name is James Chambers. I head up the global industry development side for the building and construct division of Nemencheck, which includes about 14 different brands that span the entire life cycle from the built environment.
Fantastic. Nick?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Tune, the CEO, co-founder of Optimise AI. And as it says on the tin, we use AI and digital twins to manage buildings to reduce energy and carbon emissions in use.
Fantastic. Thank you. Emma?
Hi everyone, my name is Emma Hooper. I'm an information and data strategist. I'm vice chair of Building Smart UK and Ireland and also a nima ambassador.
Thank you. Just in case anybody missed you speaking just now, Rene? Rene?
Yeah, hi guys. I'm Rene Morkos. I'm the founder and CEO of Alice Technologies. I'm also an adjunct lecturer at Stanford. I teach AI for construction.
Thank you. Noha?
Hello, everybody. My name is Noha Saleeb, and I'm Associate Professor in Creative Technologies and Construction at Middlesex University here in London. And I also lead our master's programs in BIM management. But I also have another hat in industry, for example, Director of the African BIM Report and co-author in the CIOB AI Playbook.
Fantastic. Thank you. And then lastly, Mu.
Hi, hello everyone. I hope you are enjoying the conference. My name is Murilo Piazzi. I am a digital consultant at BIM Academy, where we do all things digital. I'm also an assessor for ISO 9650 at SimplySearch. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Well, let's kick off. Noha, should we start with you? Thinking about this, how important is it that we set frameworks to govern AI and its use really in the real estate construction sector?
That's a really interesting question. There needs to be a balance between innovation and governance. We don't need to stifle innovation when it comes to the capabilities of AI, but we also need to ensure that there are at least some regulations or standards that help us ensure our rights are protected, that the outputs of AI are trustworthy, accurate, ethical, and also inclusive. And that was also one of the things that, for example, was mentioned in the Scottish AI Alliance. So I'll give you an example. Like if you train the AI algorithms, which has discrimination in or bias towards certain opinions or towards certain ethnicities or so on and so forth, it might not be able to identify that, and hence what comes out could be biased in that sense. There are examples of that had happened with hiring skill sets, for example, at Amazon, or even with security and privacy risks with Microsoft, for example. But in general, there are a few standards that are out there that help govern that. For example, there's the ISO 42001, for example, related to how to create an AI management system. There is also the AI guidance on risk management, which is the ISO 23894 and the 23053. So there are a few out there, but there has to be this balance to protect us, but at the same time allow for the innovation to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. James, have you got a view on that question?
Yeah, Noha's response was amazing and absolutely true. I think to simplify things, it's if we treat AI like a tool, it's like any other tool you implement, meaning there has to be a reason why you bring it in. There has to be a framework. There has to be guidelines. I think it's accelerated by the fact that AI is so powerful. It's constantly learning, as we learned from Rene. The capabilities and the output from AI just sort of almost demands there should be some frameworks there. So it's great to hear that things like 42001, even I think just this month or this past month, the EU Act, the European Parliament adopted the first part of the EU AI Act has gone into place as well. So I think I love the notion, though, Noha stated about the creativity, because I think the opportunities for learning with AI are so vast, given its capabilities and given its ability to mine data, that our industry truly needs, that we shouldn't stifle those. We should make sure that we're playing within those guidelines, that we are protecting ourselves from those things that, we're in a very, very sort of legal litigious market as well, the industry we work in. So the nice thing about AI is you can put in those guidelines, those parameters, and get the outputs you want from that as well. So a highly important consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think standards, I think Emma, Nick, we've seen the standards implemented across the use of BIM and then information management in the UK. From your experience with adoption of that technology in our industry, are there certain foundations that you suggest we kind of need to adopt to help us adopt AI in a more coherent, structured manner? Emma, coming to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and one of the top sort of lessons learned for me from the 15 years we've had of BIM is very much about this idea of kind of detaching information as a subject in its own right away from technology, and actually looking at information on its own as a subject in its own right. And for me, I think that needs to be done here as well. And for me, the conversation with AI is very much around the training sets and what data is being used to train the algorithms. And obviously, if that data is of good quality, then you're obviously going to get more accuracy out the other end in terms of the outputs. And in terms of the accuracy, that's where the things we've learnt in terms of information management can fit in the standards. Looking at things like the actual basic building blocks of information science, from definitions and terms to how things are connected, to how we bring in semantics, and that can actually help accelerate learning, and it might be less resource intensive and less impact on energy and water consumption. So I think almost there's a conversation to meet it halfway. And another thing I've been thinking about is in terms of the data sets. At the moment, we don't really have any data that's available. We don't have publicly available data or open source data as such in the construction industry. It's all hidden. Everybody owns their own piece of the pie, and that was in the conversation before us in terms of who owns the data. So it's very much about we need a strategy almost to could we have publicly available data for algorithms to train off, because then at least they're forming from the same starting point. Or even in terms of testing data sets, is there a way of managing that with certification? So those are some of the things just cropped into my head, whether they're right or not, I don't know, but we'll see.
That publicly available data is an interesting point, Emma. We all know how much the construction industry does a little bit of that,
exactly.
And is not very good at sharing. Do you think that is a possible solution? If you could encourage people to be more collaborative, we might be able to adopt technology quicker?
I think so. If we actually shared and everything. I mean, one of the things we have in the information management world is trying to actually show what good looks like in terms of model. But we can't do that because the clients won't let us share them. So we can never show what good looks like. So if we can't do that now, how are we going to get the vast amount of data for the algorithms to learn from?
That's a good point. James, you've got your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really critical point and a really interesting point. And one that springs to mind is that we're actually starting to see a lot of the advantageous outcomes for when we do start sharing data. And the prime examples that I can think of, again, Rene mentioned them, are the massive infrastructure projects, the publicly funded or the publicly assisted infrastructure projects, where you are finally getting shared data, open platforms, open systems. You're getting collaborative environments where everybody's actually sharing the same information. And that's where you're seeing the positive outcomes. And I think that almost might be part of that hurdle to get over, is once we start to see actual positive outcomes from either a democratized or a centralized knowledge data set, that's when I think you're going to start to see more people feel much more comfortable with adopting it.
Yeah, I think so. Nick, are you sort of seeing some of the lessons learnt in the BIM world moving into the AI world?
Yes, in terms of our technology, we've moved exactly from that in terms of we started developing our technology around the semantics and getting the semantics and understanding of how a building, the interrelationships of a building work, in other words, the cause and effect of one thing and it affects the other. And having those data sets, if you like, helps to give extra information to be able to get meaning out of. And as we talked about before, there is a lack of data, and our whole raison d'etre, if you like, is about getting information, giving people insights from the minimum amount of information they have in terms of reducing energy and carbon emissions in buildings. Now, it would be a massive opportunity, right? Just pick the UK. If, for instance, all the smart meter data that's out there was publicly available within reason, then you could train AI on all that data that would really massively help to get better insights into how to manage all our building stock to reduce energy and carbon. So that's a perfect use case for AI applications. Now, in terms of where we are, we're using the data sets that are publicly available, such as things like energy performance certificates, and then getting data sets from customers from bringing their smart meter data. That helps us move forward, but I think back to the conversation around making data sets more open would make this all go a lot faster. However, there is the whole thing around data security we can come to, which is a big issue, and the whole point around commercial practice. Does enough companies want to share it? They don't, because they want to keep the data, as we all know, for their own practical advantage. I think going back to the first question, if we structure data properly, it makes this easier to do the job. Absolutely. So there's the whole thing around, naming conventions and everything else, and we should be doing it properly. The one thing AI does do, though, is does help us with some of this unstructured data. We heard before about neural networks. Neural networks help us to be able to get some insight from unstructured information. So, if you like, to me, the two big takeaways from this conversation are: one is AI is helping us to get knowledge from this unstructured data the way we didn't have it before. So it's really helping us in that area. And two, if we could get the data, if we could get more of those data to train data sets for the common good, that would be amazing. But I see many reasons why that's just difficult.
Yeah, of course, of course. Moving away slightly from data for a moment, I often see this that any discussion around AI seems to focus on job losses. Nobody's going to have a job anymore, right? Because the black box is going to do all of our work for us. And ethics. They're the two main hot topics, it seems, that whenever you raise this, if you raise it at a dinner party, that's the first thing that comes up, right? Everyone's going to lose their jobs. Are these real concerns?
Yes, I think they are real concerns, but I would like to expand this question a little bit more and ask why these things didn't seem to be as relevant when we were started when BIM was started to be implemented a few years ago. Because if you see, many of these challenges, they were really the same. Transparency, consent, security. People mentioned before bias, fairness, and transparency, and accountability of the systems. And I think the tip for why job loss and ethics is now something that is concerning people maybe is in the name of this field that is growing, artificial intelligence. So let's take the intelligence bit here. And I think the intelligence bit is what really scares us. AI is the science of making machines intelligent. But what does intelligence means in this context? So to put it very simply, it means performing tasks like understanding natural language, recognizing patterns, learning from experience, and making decisions. And this means that machines now are getting the realm of what we considered to be skills that were unique to us humans. And of course, this competition is scary. And also the fact that intelligence can make decisions on its own is unprecedented. We're not used to systems that can make decisions on their own. And so obviously we're gonna need to know how these decisions are made, and the fact that as it was shown previously, this is not always possible at the moment, raises ethical concerns. But to be more positive, at the same time, history has shown us that every time technology replaces human labor, we develop new roles and new possibilities. And for the ethics side, I consider these to be one of the foundations of AI implementation. Really need to, if we want to unlock the potential of AI in the construction industry, we really gonna have to sit and have a serious discussion about the ethical boundaries of AI. And because without that, people, they will be just too worried with these questions, and probably will not adopt AI in a feasible way within their organizations.
Yeah, sure. Noha, you touched on ethics in your previous response. How do you feel about ethics as a real concern with AI?
Um, Ethics and careers is one of the big things that, for example, is part of my day-to-day role as an educator at the university, for example, and it's something that really worries us. In terms of ethics, if I start with the ethics part, who is considered liable if something happens wrong, wrong outputs, or a disaster that happens as a result of AI outputs? Who is considered liable for that? That is a very important, not just ethical but legal issue that we need to consider.
Sure.
And how does that affect roles? I mean, if we go back to the career side of things, if we look at just statistics, they can be pretty scary. Like, it's estimated that before the year 2050, even starting now, 2/3 of the jobs in all markets will have some degree of AI automation in them, which
Wow.
means that training for all kinds of 2/3 of all kinds of careers will have to be changed to include some sort of AI. It's estimated that 1/4 of the jobs will be lost, for example, which could be up to 300 million jobs worldwide. So they are quite scary, but it's not necessarily that scary, because on the other hand, jobs will evolve organically, and there will be inclusion of AI little by little in jobs, and there are going to be emergence of new careers. Like right now, we are seeing jobs that come out, like a prompt manager to handle how to write prompts. Of course, coding programmers for people who go deeply into doing machine learning or whatever. Data mining analysts, training data coordinators. How do you choose the training data? Predictive data analysts, the data that is being predicted out of AI. How do you actually formulate the usefulness or validity of it? Technology platform coordinators, how to coordinate between AI, robotics, big data, blockchain, as was mentioned in another panel. And most importantly for me, for example, is sustainable AI programmers. How do you align between AI and something like the 17 UN Sustainable Goals? We have talked before, or I personally have talked before, about how the 17 goals are pertinent to the construction industry, every single one of them. So how do you use AI for those 17 UN Sustainable Goals, for example? That's a field in its own right. But not, just to keep it short.
I'm very much in agreement with you. My line of argument is always, yes, some jobs will fall by the wayside, but there will be creation of other careers and other jobs, and it's a slight retraining exercise. I think Nick just got there first, James.
Yeah.
Nick?
Yeah, I think the opportunity for sustain, AI for good, if you like. I'm sure that's a buzz phrase that someone's already kind of patented. But there's so much opportunity you can do with it. There is so much good you can do with it. There is so much stuff around meeting all the UN sustainability goals. Back to the point of saving energy, saving carbon. Carbon's an obvious one. There's so many opportunities for that. And the one thing I would say is there's no point hiding from it, because it's everywhere. It's already ubiquitous, and we are already using it in every single thing we do in our daily lives. So what I always say to people is, you can't put your head in the sand. It's a bit like saying, my parents many years ago, I remember but they showed off they'd never been on the internet. Now they can't bank or do anything. At the same point, you can't say, I'm not going to use it. You need to get, you can't beat them, join them. And I think that's just the point.
I think that's a fair point. James?
Yeah, a similar point to Nick's, I think, but I'll go even simpler. Our industry needs this. If you think of the statistics we all know about, 40% of this industry is going to retire out by 2030. We're having a hard time. I think this is the first time this month, we're actually seeing people, a heavy influx of people entering into the AEC industry, so which is super positive. Maybe AI is playing a part to that. Maybe you're seeing a lot of the younger generation that are actually really incentivized and motivated by the amazing things that Rene, Alice, and everything else are doing, these new opportunities that are being created. And let's not forget that this industry that I love has got a history of doing things in a very bad way, and that is still being done. The way we contract things, the bureaucratic processes we have for site inspections and sign off and field and to be able to actually allow those really skilled people that are educated and experienced in this field to actually focus on the task that they have so much knowledge about and not be doing all these bureaucratic tasks that cost tons of money to a company. To me, that's an amazing thing. That's a great opportunity. So I think it's the other way around. I think, sure, there are concerns and they are the big topics of conversation, but they're positive ones too.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, James. And I think some of the things you're saying there are similar to what Emma was saying with the non-sharing of the data within the construction industry. The construction industry can be sort of seen as old-fashioned, and it's stuck in its bureaucratic ways, and it's not always very transparent, shall we say. But Moo, for AI to work, how important is transparency and also accountability? And how can that be achieved?
Okay, yeah. I think transparency and accountability are really fundamental in this AI journey. And I think most people watching us will agree that transparency and accountability are core values of the organizations they work, for instance. And if you go a little further, transparency and accountability are not only values of our companies, but also values of most democratic societies, right? So I think the key here is really to figure out how AI can be used as a tool that supports these values in our society, rather than being something that undermines these values. And we have the example of how this can go wrong if we look at how social media impacted our society recently, right? And AI is developing so fast that it's normal for people to feel a little bit lost about these questions about transparency and accountability. But the good thing is that we are discussing these things before adoption become too widespread. So although Nick said AI is sort of in everything, but the day-to-day tools are really maybe not as widespread yet. Also, as we saw, or other panelists here mentioned, we have some existing frameworks that can guide us when discussing these questions within our organizations. So just to add one more that maybe was not mentioned here, the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, is a framework that discusses the right for people to know how their data is collected, how the data is stored, and how the data is used. And I think, for instance, this is a great starting point for discussing transparency and accountability.
Sure. I should have said right at the outset, actually, if anybody has any questions from the audience, please do put them in the chat. We've actually had one come in specifically for you, Rene, from Ian Mulligan. Ian says, thank you, Rene, for an excellent presentation, informative across the spectrum. Now to the question. You referenced that you had been working on your tool for 14 years. What was your initial inspiration to develop this, and have you changed position on what you can achieve now versus where you began the journey?
Great question. I think that there's sort of two levels of answer I can give you. There's two questions here. What was the initial inspiration? The inspiration was simple. The inspiration was Why should I tell the computer how to build it? Why doesn't the computer tell me how to build it? That simple. I mean, that was literally the North Star of, I've put 49,000 hours of my life into this darn problem at this point. What's changed? Two things. One, when we started it, it was not deemed possible. So, how could you possibly explain to a computer the complexity that is construction? Like, how could you possibly tell the computer fast run concrete and regular concrete production rates and calendars and overtime and elements and staircases and slabs and there's just so much that goes into construction. How can you possibly explain that to a computer? And it was deemed impossible. And we have solved it. We have definitely done it. I've shown you guys a demo of how that works. So I think the first step was, oh my God, it's actually doable. Like we've proven it. It took us 3.5 years of literally kicking this thing in the teeth over and over and over and over again. It would catch fire, and then it would work, and we'd fix the next layer of problems, and those would catch fire, and the next layer, and next layer, and next layer. And about 3.5 years in, we had something that was starting to actually solve real world problems. The second layer to my answer is what's possible. I actually think that what we're going to start seeing is what I call composite AI. So what you're going to start seeing is the interplay between deterministic systems that are good at solving math and engineering problems. Neural nets are notoriously very bad at it. You're going to start seeing the interplay between systems that are good at solving math and engineering problems, systems that use neural nets to scour large information sets and summarize those for you, and the human. And that interplay, I think, is what we're going to see, I don't know if less than 3 years, but in the next 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to start seeing that kind of stuff coming up. And to answer your question, I think the thing that I've been thinking about for 14 years at this point is latency. And if you look at our field, your decision and information latencies are 4 weeks, 2 weeks. You update a schedule every month. You get information from the field on a 2-week basis. To kind of wrap up what I was saying is that what I think you're going to finally start seeing in the next 3 to 5 years is the substantial reduction in both decision and information latency, and to the order of maybe even minutes, right? Which is kind of fascinating. You can get information from a construction site, it goes into your system, updates the schedule, runs a bunch of simulations, and then you can basically fire that information back out to whatever is doing the work in the field. So that's kind of what I think we're going to start seeing.
Thanks, Rene. Rene, just going back to the transparency point, do you think it's possible that we can achieve accuracy without transparency?
I'm going to tell you an opinion that's maybe a little bit controversial. So okay. I was sitting at the TED conference in Vancouver. That's where I am. And I was invited to a European AI in Europe meeting. So when I sat down and I listened to the AI in Europe meeting, about 45 minutes into the meeting, I said, the first question that was asked is, what is happening in AI in Europe? And there was 2 names that were put on the table. And that was it. And then 45 minutes later, I sort of said, I'd like you to realize something, which is we spent 45 minutes talking about regulation. So a lot of the European conversation about AI turns out to be about regulation, transparency, and all the other stuff. And the reason that I'm saying this is that I've looked at the EU coming out with a whole bunch of AI regulation. I sometimes wonder whether the conversation shouldn't be about inventing the technology, because, by the way, the technology that's really running all this stuff came out of the UK, DeepMind. That's really where it came from, right? And so to answer your question, I think that what I would nudge the conversation towards is the invention, right, of the technology rather than the management of it. To then specifically answer your question, can you achieve,
can you achieve accuracy without transparency?
I mean, look at what the systems are doing, right? I mean, nobody knows what these systems are actually doing. Google's not sharing it. DeepMind's not sharing it. Facebook's is not sharing it, right? I don't think you need transparency is not something that's going to tell you how the system works, right? You need larger data sets and better algorithms, right? That's what I think you need, right?
Okay. Mood. Sorry, Rene, carry on.
Sorry about that. Maybe to answer the question, the fundamental challenge with accuracy, right, is in the neural network. The technology itself has that fundamental flaw or issue to it. That has not been solved by anybody, by Llama, by Gemini, by OpenAI, nobody has solved that, even with the billions of dollars that have been poured into it. I absolutely assure you that these people are spending an incredible amount of resources. I'm talking in the tens of billions of dollars to solve that problem. My opinion, from where I'm sitting, and I'm not the guy that's running a multi-billion-dollar LLM initiative at Google, but my opinion is that what you'll start seeing is the integration between the old school AI systems that were highly accurate but not as versatile, and the new school stuff that is versatile and not accurate. What I think, and as a result, you will solve that accuracy issue, right? So, again, I don't think transparency is what's going to solve it.
Okay. And Emma, I think I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of accuracy, it's how do you measure it? I think that's one of the questions we need to answer within the industry. And go back to what I was talking about earlier, in terms of the actual sort of test data sets, if we actually had standardized ones that we could actually measure models against, then at least we could then give some kind of assurance that these are reaching a certain level. Nothing's ever going to be 100% accurate ever. So, but we need like that benchmark there to actually give people that trust factor with regards to it. So I think overall as an industry, I think we need to come up with some kind of strategy around all this rather than just letting it happen to us.
Okay, I've got a plethora of hands up now. Moo?
Yeah, so I think we can say that it's possible to achieve accuracy without transparency, but obviously this is not ideal. So I try to explain that with an analogy with what happens in academia and scientific research in general. So, would the results of an academic publication be considered accurate if the research was not transparent about the methodology, let's say? So surely, people would question the results, and the results would not be taken seriously. So although it might be possible to achieve accuracy without transparency, we have a third component in this discussion, which is trust. And there is a really, simple formula, which is accuracy plus transparency equals trust, and accuracy minus transparency equals distrust. So this component is very important.
Okay, I think I've got all of the panelists with this one. Noha, we'll come to you next.
I think one of the important things to think about is what is the definition of accuracy, and which leads us to the conversation about are we validating or verifying the results? Because there's a difference between making sure whether something is a carbon copy of something else, or whether it's actually valid outcomes that can come out of it, useful outcomes, because it could be a correct like a checklist of that this is correct when it's copied from something else, or it makes sense in its own right. But whether it's useful or not, that's another issue. And I would like to corroborate the fact that the less transparency you have, the less it's possible to check whether something is useful, let alone being accurate in being like a carbon copy of something else. So it might not really help the agenda that there's less transparency.
Okay, James?
Yeah, I love where you're going with that, Neha. I was gonna say the same thing. Is what are you asking for? Because to me, that is also the amazing opportunity with AI. When we think of generative design, the beautiful thing about that is I can put in the swim lanes and the parameters to say, here's the building codes, here's the standards, here's the laws, here's the regulations that I need you to stick to. Go out and give me 30 different bridge computations. And that's what I want, is I want it to go out and give me 30 different ones, that it's thinking of things that it's never thought of, or that I wouldn't think of when I sat down to design a bridge. Then you need that human element. What you've done is you've created these 30 great things that a human mind now needs to come along and say, all right, those two are brilliant. Never thought about that. Let me go and do the deep dive, and I'll create my own accuracy based on the opportunity that it's been created now. And to me, that's where I see some massive efficiency gains and forward. So I like the notion of what is accuracy and what is it you're asking it to do, because That's kind of what generative design, if we think of AI from that perspective, it's asking you to think outside the box. That's what we're asking it to do.
Nick?
An interesting point around the whole thing about data quality, and I think it's a really important one, rubbish in, rubbish out. So if your model is trained on rubbish, it will be 100% accurate potentially against rubbish. So that I think is really, really important. So we've been doing a lot of work around using AI and modeling how buildings are going to perform against energy performance certificates, and the guys are coming, we're 90% accurate. But I'm saying that's 90% accurate against something that's not very accurate. Do you get my point? So like that's really useful, and it's got practical application, but it's really important we bear that in mind. And you've got you've got to keep against what it actually is, the data source in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we've got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to ask you to answer my last question each, but maybe in under 30 seconds, if it's possible. AI adoption and implementation is definitely on the rise, right? What would be your one takeaway from the discussion we've had this afternoon, from Rene's presentation? One takeaway for our attendees today. I will come to you, Rene, first, because you gave the presentation. What's the one takeaway you'd like people to take from your presentation and from this conversation?
Get on it. The train is leaving the station. I wouldn't worry about your job. I would worry. AI is not going to take your job. Someone using AI is going to take your job, right? Get on it. Start getting your hands dirty. Start, sit down with a few folks in the company, put together an AI strategy, and just go out and start trying it. Like that would be my takeaway. Get on it. Start doing it.
Thanks, Rene. Nick?
Yeah, Rene's the main premier speaker, right? So he's finally had the right thing. So he stole my thunder, because I'd say the same. I think the analogy I often use is a Tesla car or an electric car, and I think we seem becoming more happy to use those. And you think that is the machine and the human working together now. When you're driving down a motorway, it's doing so much of it for you, and that is the way that we're going in construction. So the point is back kind of what Rene said. Industries are doing it now. Construction industry's got to jump on it and try to catch up. I know it's more complicated and it's not as simple as manufacturing. So yeah, same.
Thanks, Nick. Emma?
For me, it's very much about initial inputs, the data quality side of it, making sure all that's as good as we can get it, and really thinking about it in terms of an overall industry perspective, and actually where the control sits. So for me, it's let's not just be led by the technology companies. Let's retain some control as an industry as a whole and all work together on it.
Fantastic, thank you. Me?
Yeah. Me is treating the AI as your new working colleague, and this means that we need to mentor the AI to increase our capacity to finish tasks with the level of quality we want. And it is as if we have a new colleague at work who needs to be introduced to some of our tasks. And initially, of course, this might take up some of our time, but in the long run, showing our colleague how to do the job is definitely time well spent, because then we're going to be able to share the workload.
Fantastic, thank you. Noha?
Definitely agree with Rene about getting on it. But one thing that I always consult about is, please, before embarking on using AI blindly, to perform a gap analysis. And that involves at least three main things, like what are the uses that you want out of AI? What information do you want to get out of AI? That's one thing. Mm-hmm. The other thing, what resources do you currently have and what do you need in order to implement AI, whether that's skill sets of people, information databases, physical software and hardware, your supply chain, whatever. And the third thing is whether to use bespoke or off-the-shelf solutions and so on and so forth. But they do that gap analysis at the beginning before even starting the journey. That's the one thing.
Fantastic, thank you. And James?
I think opportunity. This is presenting some great areas for opportunity for our industry. Our industry has gone through a massive pendulum. I've seen more adoption and introduction of digital practices and technology into construction in the last 10 years than I've ever seen before. And that I think, going back to that laggardy industry, it's amazing. And we were forced into it through horrible outcomes of COVID, but the industry moved forward and adopted digital communication and remote working. And I see this as another journey, but maybe to pick on Nick's tune, I would say yes, everybody is like embracing electric cars, but the best gap is the people that are like, I'm going to go with a hybrid because it's keeping some of what I know, some of the swim lanes that I've got. It's got the things that we need. I've got the efficiency gains and the environmental. I've got all these other great outputs from electric motors, but I've sort of got both. And I think that's where I would say that's where AI right now is. Like, there's ways that we can embrace it, but keeping those thoughts in the swim lanes, I think, is a great opportunity.
Thank you, James. So if I can just recap, my takeaway is not from my own brain, it's from listening to you experts this afternoon, and some of your nuggets that I noted down during the afternoon. So I think we need some balance between innovation and governance was something that I noted down. When technology replaces human behaviour, we create new rules. So I'm interested to see what's going to come about through this. Seeing information in its own right away from technology, I thought was a really good point Emma made. Our industry needs this. James sort of alluded to that and said that quite clearly. And then Rene, during your presentation, that the fact that this is really the biggest transformation in the past 2,000 years happening now to our industry, that really struck me. And Nick, to your point, that there's no point hiding away from this, guys. It's everywhere in our daily lives. So to finish on Rene's words again, get on it, guys. AI's here.